people said yes, one person said no to the
I'm
poll.
so glad that
Of
the
course,
CPO called in. You know, people wondering why she come back
it
to the
just
polls so
shows
soon.
you. It just shows you that when you generate a positivity and a
Hope,
transformational
hope.
view, and well, the positivity and hope, how a country just falls behind you.
Even in difficult times.
Yeah,
Even in difficult times, because Barbados is going through a very difficult time like other Caribbean countries. Even in difficult times.
yeah.
As a matter of
And
fact, probably even more so in difficult times.
because she was certainly able to convincingly convey that narrative to the point that you sweep the election twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But more so in the second round. More so the second
Yeah.
time. Because I think it had one seat hanging since the last time, and then she took all this time. Her party took all. So
So it
it
means
goes to a type of inspirational leadership.
so it resonates with people, and it not only resonates with Barbadians, it resonates with
Across the
Caribbean people.
region. Hmm.
The English speaking Caribbean is certainly enamored of her and her approach. I think sometimes
Well,
to the
go on live
irritation,
Barbados.
yeah, sometimes I think to the irritation of other prime ministers.
But he said, go
Um,
on live Barbados. If you ain't talking about Barbados, who said that?
but
Call names,
I'm
I'll
not,
whistle.
I'm not going down your road.
Well, go on live
I'm
Barbados if you're so impressed by. Go on live Barbados.
But I'm just saying that, it's obviously the
And
region. She's
apparently,
captivated the region. So the mere idea that she's now considered one of the 100 most influential people on the planet
by Time
is,
Magazine.
yeah, by Time Magazine, is indicative of how much
Yeah.
she is liked,
Yeah.
not only in the
It comes
Caribbean,
down
but
to leadership
obviously
style too.
globally.
I've said
Yeah.
over and over, it comes down, and not everyone can be the same type of leader. Let's understand that. But it also it bodes for a different type of leadership that's needed for a different generation. Um, authoritarian, is that it, or authoritative? Authoritarian types are less likely to capture millennials right now.
No,
Nobody ain't taking a buff, so just
nope,
lock
nope,
you
they
off.
don't. They don't.
They just lock you off. They have time with that.
And, and don't talk for Gen Zers. They
Yeah,
move.
you can't hand down pronouncements to them. You just no. And nobody is going to be freaked out. Oh my God, ooh, I'm so afraid. No,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
world past that. The world is way past that. You have to have a different kind of engagement with the population now. And this is not just about the Prime Minister. This is about leadership in general. But the first thing Bruce is we're talking about the Prime Minister. Yes, he's part of leadership, a significant part, a very important part. But he's not the only significant leader in the country. But I also think it has a lot to do, and I've said it in other fora, with her age. Mia Motley is 56 or 55 years old.
Well, I have always said, Paul, that until the post 1962 generation comes of age and takes over the leadership positions, you're not going to see transformational change in the way that you want to.
Mm-hmm. So you have to lead for a different type of generation, a different type of world now. And, look at like people like Justin Trudeau, They appeal to a different generation while still having the respect of the slightly older generations. So, and that's very important now. The top-down leadership approach does not necessarily work as effectively as it would have 20 years ago. People just don't have, it's like wherever. Especially if the society is under strife. If the society is going through crises, to me, that is when you need a particularly inspiring type of leadership and leadership pronouncements. And Mia Motley certainly has been able to do that in Barbados. And then look at what, maybe it's part of the reason Father Augustine was able to be so successful in Tobago. Because it's a different type and generation of leadership. And if you want to attract that 20, 30-year-old voter, you can't have an authoritarian approach. It's just not going to work as effectively as it would have 20 years ago. People are more educated, they're more worldly, they're more dismissive, They're very, very dismissive, they're like wherever. And in the age of the Kim Kardashians and the social media, you really have to have a different type of approach. There's no one pocket of power base that is going to be able to manage or control the society as it would have 40 years ago. That's just not going to happen anymore. So, good for her, I mean, to be able to be on Time magazine in that way. And I think the magazine also said Rihanna had been able to get on that list in 2018. So, and it's not that Barbados doesn't have problems, Barbados has a lot of economic problems and people are going through a lot of challenges there, like everywhere else. But as Richard has said over and over, and I agree with him, he said there's something very powerful about inspiring hope in people. Very, 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 very transformational, even in tough times, inspiring hope. So that is very important. Why are you calling me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on a simple, I suppose on a simple level, it's called buy-in because you're getting the population to buy into
Your vision.
whatever your philosophy and vision is. And it takes particular type of leaders to get that. I
Well,
mean,
you have to be a great
get it.
communicator too.
I get it that Trinidad and Tobago is a different place to Barbados. Trinidad and Tobago is more complicated because of our mixes.
Way more
But
complicated.
but that kind of leadership that exudes that type of positive
Yeah, but Richard, to get a
transformational
whole
vibe.
different party supporters to come on your side in an election is very impressive, eh?
Yeah.
To get
And so
people of disparate political alignments to all line up under one party in this time is very, very difficult, eh? So you got to be doing
no,
something inspirational.
yeah, exactly.
So even if you
And
don't
so
have
that's
the racial divide that we have here, you still have the political and class divide. But it's all still lined up behind Mia Motley.
yep. So how does that translate? Well, I mean, in Trinidad, I for me, this is just me looking at the history of our leaders that we've had. There's none that has been, in my opinion, exuding that kind of positive transformational energy. I can't think of one, but maybe you can, Paul. I don't know. I can't think of
Well,
one.
let me tell you, yes and no. Because I remember both Mrs. Pasabi Sessa and Dr. Rowley during the campaigns that they both won, particularly Dr. Rowley's first in 2015 and Mrs. Pasabi Sessa in 2010, were able to energize large sections of the population and think, well, okay, this is a new type of time and we could get to a different place now, and then it fell back into the status quo. So
Well,
yes and
then,
no. I
Paul,
think
the
I think
answer,
they had been at
but
some point been able to at least
but then the
energize,
answer
ignite
is
some level
no.
of hope.
Then the answer is no, because the issue of transformational politics and that kind of positive energy and vibe and translates in your actions. It's not just what you say. And what you're talking about there is what they said in terms of motivating voters to vote for them. But what they did do,
But your
that,
question was about whether or not we'd seen that kind of thing, and that's I'm saying yes,
yeah,
we have in 2010 for a short period and in 2015.
yeah, but I disagree. Because it's not just about convincing the electorate. Mia Motley is more than that.
Yeah, you're right. She's white, she's pan Caribbean and global, in her appeal.
And but not only that, her actions lead you to that analysis of her.
Yeah,
She's not just talking.
when she made to me a bold and revolutionary statements about the banks and the banks understanding that they can't be charging for everything, to me that was very inspiring because I've never heard a regional leader take on the financial institutions like that. You understand?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
and in defense of people, the people.
For her citizens.
Yeah. So and that kind of statement, you're right, really inspires a different kind of respect of leaders because most leaders but just fall into it. Just go banks have to make money, and the class divisions and the economic divisions stay. So you're right. You're right in that regard.
They can say the words, and they can give the vote for us. We are going to X and we are going to Y and we are going to Z. But it's when you're in office, what you do and what you say and how you say it.
And your policies.
Yeah.
See, let's open the phone lines for a while we wait for Professor.
Okay, it's going to come in about 2 minutes' time, so we could open up the lines a little bit. All right.
Wayne and what are we talking about?
Maybe some people see that we have had leadership. I mean, even Eric Williams, when he came in 1956, and then of course led us into independence in 1962.
Yeah.
And
it was a sense of hope past colonialism.
He came. He rode on a wave of populism and of course the whole
movement.
Intoxication of we being an independent country. But how and did he do some things that were transformational? I guess he did. But how much was that sustained? Because there were so many things. If you read, was it Selwyn Cudjoe who would have written the book on him, the myth, the man and the myth, or something like that? That book about Eric Williams. I think it's Selwyn Cudjoe. I can't remember exactly. Is it? Or is it Selwyn Ryan? Somebody help me, one of our callers.
We have a call here. Good morning.
And that was the first book to me that critiqued. Yeah. Good morning, caller.
Contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In respect of success, what is required is good leadership and good management. Two most important recipes for success. And over the years, I want to ask you all gentlemen, a tiny thing with the topic you all were speaking. You all remember, left, right, and center, we used to preach multiracial,
Recording in progress.
Multi-religious society. The leadership right now, make sure they abandon that. That is why Trinidad and Tobago today is in the state and condition that it is today. With crime, and anybody could say, you know, what it is happening in this country. So,
all right.
What? Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you so much, caller. All right. 31 minutes after the hour is 7 o'clock. Let's welcome Professor Christopher Oura to the program. Good morning to you, Professor. How you doing? Long time no see.
Good morning, everybody. Coming all the way from hotfoot from the Dominican Republic. So
you indeed are this morning. Wonderful.
Yeah. Good. How is everybody?
Good.
We are all good. And you're good, I see.
Those beautiful beaches there. Wow.
Yeah, I've been struggling walking around the hotel trying to find a place where there's no music and no peacocks, but I think I found a place here.
Morning, Prof. How are you? Everything's all right?
Well, yeah, good.
Nice location.
Good, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so we wanted to chat with you a bit about COVID and monkeypox. And first of all, let's ask where you think we are globally in terms of the pandemic now. I recently traveled to New York, and very few people were wearing masks, I'll tell you. It's like I look like a strange person on a bus and on a train and in the mall, sometimes wearing a mask. So,
I think I came through Miami Airport yesterday, and the majority of people weren't wearing masks. So I mean, what we have now with COVID is different situations in different countries, but certainly in the US and the UK, where a lot of people are vaccinated. People have sort of given up really on the public health measures. They've given up on their masks and their physical distancing. And what we're seeing at the moment is Omicron and subvariants of Omicron circulating in these countries. And because this virus now has reduced in its virulence, I'm not saying it's mild, because it is very serious in certain people, but in the majority of people, it is not causing anything like as severe signs as the original viruses that we had, 2 years ago or 1 year ago. A lot of people are getting it, not really seeing much in the way of symptoms, and are getting some level of immunity from it, and they're just going on with their lives. There is still a risk, even from these Omicron, these milder Omicron, though, certain people, as we've been saying from the start, certain people with underlying health conditions, older people, are still at risk. And as we're seeing around the world, people are still dying of it. People are still having to go to hospital, but considerably less. So this virus is doing exactly what, and I think I may have said in one of the previous interviews with you, exactly what we expected. There's a few bumps along the road, but what happens with these viruses is they basically don't, they want to become more transmissible because that's in their interest. They want to infect as many cells, as many people as possible. But they don't want to give people serious disease or kill people, because a virus is, as I've said before, it's an obligate intracellular parasite. It needs a live cell to survive. So what we see is viruses moving along that line of increased transmissibility, but decreased virulence. And in the end, the likelihood is that, like with other coronaviruses of the past, this will become into the pool of common cold viruses that we get, coronaviruses again, that we get now, lots and lots of coronaviruses, which had caused pandemics, probably, some of them, many, many years ago, but they'd adapted, mutated, and changed and become very transmissible but low virulence, and they come into the pool. And that's what we're seeing, an evolution going on. We can't sit on our haunches. We've still got to be worried about this one, because it's part the way down that process. It's not there yet. And it is still potentially a lot more dangerous than the common cold coronavirus.
Differentiate for us endemic stage and pandemic stage, and where are we?
Yeah. We are very much moving into the endemic stage now.
What does that mean?
It means that we have to live with the virus. It means the virus will be with us, among us, going forward. We're not going to get rid of it, and we have to learn to live with it. Usually endemic viruses, we have this thing called endemic stability, where we have relatively stable situation where the virus doesn't cause too much of a problem, but it's still there in society. We still have to be aware that, as I said, certain people with certain conditions can be seriously affected. We still have to keep a very close eye on it, because this could surprise us. It's only mutations in this virus. We saw with Omicron when it jumped from the Delta type virus to a very, very different virus, probably in one individual person, probably in one immunocompromised person. And it had the chance, because of, to make a lot of changes. Now, there is a possibility it could do that again, and there is a possibility that it could pivot and turn the other way and become more virulent again, but that's unlikely. That's why we need to keep on sequencing, we need to keep on following, and for the time being we need to keep on taking care, especially in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, when only 50% of the people are vaccinated. Yeah.
Well, Professor, if it is that it's becoming more endemic and we have to learn to live with it, what is going on with China and their policy of zero COVID? Is it that China is making a huge nonsensical public policy decision with regard to treating with COVID?
I can't understand. I absolutely can't understand the Chinese decision. There's no logic in it. As far as I'm aware, they've got most of their population vaccinated. And that virus, they are not going to stop it getting into China. They are not going to stop it circulating. It is going to have a massive effect on their economy if they keep this kind of no COVID policy going. That virus is going to get in. They can't keep their borders closed, and they're going to have rounds of the virus, waves of the virus. But as long as they've got their population at least vaccinated and boosted, that will be now there's reasonable treatments out there which they can use. They're going to have to go through some level of COVID to get through and out the other side. I don't believe that this will work myself. I might be proved wrong, but I don't believe that this no COVID policy is going to work, and it's having enormous economic effects. So I'm not sure who's advising them.
Mm.
The situation you described earlier, where we still need to be careful, because the virus can surprise us. What can that surprise look like, and what conditions can lead to that?
So exactly what the type of thing we saw when Omicron appeared, which seems to indicate that probably the virus actually mutated a lot, basically, in one individual immunocompromised person. So it was given the chance to mutate a lot. Or it could go back into an animal species, mutate a lot, and then come back into humans. Now, if that happens, and those mutations that happen, which are random, remember, give that virus something, the ability to be more virulent, and that could happen. It's unlikely because it's not in a virus's interest, but it could happen. Then things would turn around and we go backwards. Then we probably go forwards again. It would be a big bump in the road. So it's critical that we keep this sequencing surveillance going on all around the world, and not only in US or here in Trinidad where we have it, but in hotspots around the world where this virus, because this virus is circulating massively because it's evading to a certain extent some of the vaccine, and so even in countries like the UK, which are highly vaccinated, the BA4, BA2, BA4, BA5, these subvariants of Omicron are circulating in people. They might not know it, but it's still so it still has the chance to mutate and change. But the really critical areas to look is in some of these areas where we have a lot of immunocompromised people, like a lot of HIV people with HIV, because it seems to be in that kind of condition, in that kind of person, that gives the opportunity for this virus to possibly make those sort of more widespread changes like it did last time. So that's really critical that we keep an eye on it.
At what stage do you think, or what would be the markers that the World Health Organization will declare the pandemic over? And is there a time frame you think on that?
Yeah, they'll probably be quite careful about that. I mean, it's a very good question, because I mean, I know a lot of countries have pretty much declared it over already by their actions. I think we need some more time to see what this Omicron does before we do anything. I think we need to try to vaccinate more people around the world. I think some countries will go first. Some countries have already, like Denmark and pretty much the UK. They've declared it over. But the World Health Organization has to declare the pandemic over from a global perspective. So it has to take into consideration countries which have no vaccination, pretty much. Haiti, for example, what's going on? Some countries, most of it in Africa is single percent. But we have to also look critically at the amount. How many people are actually going into hospital? How many people are dying of it? And whether some countries might decide just to live with it. They might just say, we're not going to vaccinate any more people, and because it's lower virulent, we're going to live with it. And that's pretty much what's happening now in Africa, in many countries. I think when you look at the seroprevalence in these countries, which is done in some of them more than others, that's looking at the antibody level. So how many people have actually had the virus in the past due to a natural infection. They found that many people, high percentage of people, have had it. So this virus has infected a lot of people. So the question is, do they need to be vaccinated as well, or can they just move forward, with those antibodies?
In terms of safety, is it premature now for countries to be removing mask mandates?
I think it depends a little bit on where you are with vaccination, to be honest with you. I think in countries where they haven't got high levels of vaccination, like Jamaica or even Trinidad, I think people have to be careful, and especially around vulnerable people, and also in countries where people who are more susceptible, with high levels of diabetes and things like that. So what they did on the plane yesterday is they said, masks are masks are voluntary, but please respect the people around you. And if they ask you to wear a mask, or the hostess asks you to wear a mask, please do. There has to be a certain amount of that going on. But I think for the time being, I think masks are clearly still reducing the spread, but there will be a time in the not too distant future when they have to be made voluntary. They will
Do you think a move like Barbados did recently this week, earlier this week, I think, where they have advised, and I'm paraphrasing here, for outdoor use masks are optional, for indoor use masks are mandatory, and mask protocols remain in schools?
I think that's a really, I'm surprised countries haven't done that earlier, actually, because the evidence of spreading this virus through the outdoor events is there's a lot of evidence to say that this virus is not easily spread when we're outdoors. So the risk is far lower outdoors. It's spread indoors when people are in close proximity indoors. That makes sense because it's spread by aerosol, or in schools. So ventilation is critical. So I think, the next stage definitely for Trinidad and Tobago, the next stage should be to say that when you're outdoors, you needn't necessarily wear a mask, although it might be recommended. You need to do it. Yeah.
How much more of a complication is it that we have a flu going around also? Not this weekend before, I came down with just come back from the US 3 days before, and I came down with the body cramps, headache, joint ache. I mean, I could have sworn I had COVID, and ran and got tested, and did a home test. It was negative. Ran and got tested in a hospital. It was negative. So they told me what you have is the flu. And so you have the COVID running and the flu running, and people kind of caught in between.
It's very difficult for people. I had exactly the same thing we had exactly the same thing in my family, a nasty cold virus going around, which was, to all intents and purposes, exactly the same symptoms as COVID. And yet the thing to do is to get a lateral, an antigen test, and that should let you know whether it is or isn't. And it's complicated because this is now, as I said earlier, it's developing into a cold virus. It's coming down that line. So the basic symptoms are exactly the same. They've widened the symptoms from the original ones when it was taste and smell, and there were the 3 that they had. Now there's a whole classic cold viruses, all what you had. That could have been COVID. It could have not. It was probably it was more serious, your cold virus, what you had, than if you'd had COVID. Who knows? That's the thing, is people are getting it so mildly now, a lot of people, that they don't even know they've had it. They just have like a slight tickle in their throat and go for a test, and oh my word, I've got it.
Mm-hmm. And what about 4th round vaccinations? Do you think it will become by the end of this year or next year that every year you just take a vaccine for COVID, or will they combine flu vaccines, or can they combine flu vaccines and COVID vaccines into the future?
Yeah, I think they're looking into those. I think it would be great if they combine the flu and the COVID vaccines. I think there will be a big call for that. There's no reason why they won't be able to do that. I think we'll get updated COVID vaccines probably in the autumn. It looks like the Omicron variant is going to be the dominant one going forward. So they'll probably likely make a vaccine based on that particular variant, or they might actually make a vaccine that has a few variants in it, the Delta and the Omicron, because they can do that as well. They can multiply them up. So I think we'll have more. I think we'll have more targeted vaccines, which are more effective as we move forward. And I think they'll try to combine the vaccine, with the flu vaccine. That would be great, so we could get both at the same time. And I think there will probably be some level of booster. Yes, definitely. I mean, the evidence is that with from Israel is the 4th booster does give you a rise in antibodies, so it gives you probably increased protection, but you still have, from the original 3, very good protection against severe disease and death. But you might, with a booster, have better protection against getting the milder diseases or passing it on. So, yeah.
Is there any consensus yet on whether we have to, whether the issue of boosters are going to be a continuous part of our life going forward? Are we going to have it annually? Are we going to have it every 6 months?
Yeah, I think probably it won't be every 6 months. We have to look at longitudinal studies down the line at the immune system and see what it's doing, but it's looking like we're getting good protection, quite long-lasting protection from vaccines certainly against severe disease and death, certainly, but and it's looking that as we get boosted, we're getting this boost in our antibodies, and then it's after 2 or 3 months it is reducing. We need to know more about what's happening with our T cells as well, because that's important, because those are very important in getting rid of viruses. But I think the likelihood is there will be an annual booster, and that annual booster will be updated according to what type of coronavirus is circulating, just the same as the flu vaccines. And I think that's probably okay, and it'll probably be annually, I would say. But I might be wrong. I don't think we'll be vaccinated every 6 months.
Yeah, but you have so many people who are unvaccinated, like in Trinidad, of course, it's roughly 50% who are unvaccinated and who feel now vindicated in a sense, whether they're correct or not, but they feel vindicated that, well, look, it's now less likely you're going to die from it because the variants have mutated to whatever degree now. And they feel even more of a reason not to get vaccinated, and it's now feeding into people who are not even getting boosted.
Yeah, I know.
So how do we navigate that?
I had somebody at work come to me the other day who said, "Oh, Professor Oura, I was in hospital for 2 weeks with COVID. I was really bad, and then he said to me, oh, and I wasn't vaccinated," as if it was a good thing. And I was saying, well, if you'd been vaccinated, you wouldn't have gone to hospital probably. But it was like it was a good thing not being vaccinated. I mean, it's a tough one because we have gone through a lot, and the vaccinated people have helped massively the situation. We had to get those people vaccinated, otherwise our health systems would have been overwhelmed. So it is a tough one as the virus gets less virulent. People say, well, I don't need a vaccine, but this is still not a mild virus. It must be said, it's not a mild virus, and people, especially people with underlying health conditions and older people, are still dying of it and having serious disease around the world. So I would strongly recommend people to get vaccinated, and I would strongly recommend people to have the booster, that third booster, 6 months after the study. That is really critical. In fact, we will be calling that the initial course in the future. That happens with many vaccines. You have 2 vaccines a few weeks apart, and then you have what's called a third vaccine, not a booster, 6 months later, because that's needed to really bolster the immune system. And then after that, every year. So that booster is critical. And there's lots of boosters around. There's lots of vaccines around at the moment. So people who haven't had a booster, I would strongly recommend them to get it, because that really helps not only severe disease and death, but also helps you stop transmitting it as well. And if you have vulnerable people that you're in contact with, like we all do, that's the critical thing now. That is the critical thing. If you get it, even if you get it mildly and you haven't been vaccinated, how are you going to feel if you give it to your granny or you give it to your husband who's got diabetes and then they die of it? How are you going to feel about that? That's what would be going through my mind. I'd feel terrible about it when there's a great vaccine out there would have probably may have stopped me getting it in the first place. This is what has to go through people's minds. It's the vulnerable people that we're in contact with that we're putting in danger.
What is monkeypox?
Monkeypox is a virus that has been around for a long time, so we know quite a lot about it. I teach my students about it all the time. In fact, one of my students got hold of me the other day and said, "Oh, thank you, Professor Oura, for teaching us on monkeypox." And I show all these nasty pictures that we're seeing at the moment, which are at the far end of the spectrum, I have to say. This is usually quite a mild disease. What's happened at the moment with monkeypox is it's come to the West. Everybody's and it has spread, and we haven't picked it up. So it's spread in a lot of countries. It's spread in certain groups of people who are more susceptible to it. It's and so now we're playing catch up. Now we're trying to find out the extent of people that are infected. We're identifying them, and we're going to be isolating them and stopping them transmitting it. And because this is a virus that is not easily transmitted, unlike COVID, it's only transmitted by close contact. We will be able to stop this virus by simple, identifying the contacts and then getting them to isolate.
What is close contact? Is close contact physical contact, or because COVID was spread by air?
Yes, it's pretty physical, the contacts, because this virus is spread usually, you've seen those lesions. We've all seen that poor boy who's, his pictures, all African boy with those lesions. And what happens is those lesions start off as a rash, and then they become bumpy, and then they fill with fluid. That fluid is full of the virus. Then that bursts, and then you get a sort of scab. And that scab, if you scratch it and things, that's full of virus. So you get these lumps, especially on the face, on the feet and the hands, and you can imagine you're scratching them, you're pulling those scabs off or breaking that fluid, and the fluid comes out. There's loads of virus there, so you can transmit it by direct contact, on blankets, by touching people. But it also causes those lesions in some of our mucous membranes, so mouth and eyes and things. So in some circumstances it can be transmitted by close coughing, when you get large droplets, not the little droplets that we get that transmit it with COVID, those tiny little ones that go in the air. These are large ones. So it's all about close contact, this. And that's why it seems to be spreading in close contact groups. When they're looking outside those groups, they're not seeing so much in the way of transmission. It's much easier beast to control this and get under control. The trouble is, because we weren't expecting it in the West, we've let it go, and because it's mild, we haven't seen it, and now we're catching up.
Is it fatal?
It's generally a mild disease. However, under certain circumstances, I've said this before, you say this with COVID, but under certain circumstances, certain people who might be immunocompromised, who might have underlying health conditions, it seems that people who haven't been vaccinated against smallpox, I've been vaccinated, some of us are old enough to be vaccinated against smallpox, so certain groups of people, if those spots can be very extensive, as we've seen in some of those photos, and they can get infected, and if you don't get the right health treatment, you don't get antibiotics and things like that, it can be fatal, but it's not usually fatal. It's usually treatable.
Is there a preventative vaccine for monkeypox?
Yeah, there is. There's the classic smallpox vaccine. The good thing about these pox viruses is there's a pox virus for every animal out there. And the good thing about the pox viruses there's quite a lot of protection against the different viruses, although they're specific. On the whole, they're specific. Some of them are zoonotic. We've heard this phrase before. They pass from the animal to the human. So this monkeypox is a particularly zoonotic virus. It's particularly transmissible from animals to humans. But the good thing is, vaccines that have been raised against some of the other pox viruses, like, for example, smallpox, that protects against monkeypox. We get about 85% protection, which is pretty good, using the classic smallpox vaccine. So some countries are sort of digging that out, and there's a new one. There is a monkeypox vaccine as well that I heard that a commercial company have produced as well. So WHO are working with them specific. That'll probably be even more protective. So yeah, the vaccines are good, and we have them. I don't think we'll need them very much because you can control this by contact transmission, by contact tracing. You know what we all know about, because it's much easier to do that because it doesn't transmit as fast and as effectively between humans.
So we should not be unduly worried about monkeypox.
I don't think so. No, watch that space is what I would say. The scientists need to get to work and just check that nothing untoward's happening. This is what we call this is a type of virus that doesn't mutate very easily. So it's not going to do what COVID does and rush off and change and become something new and nasty. It's what we call a DNA virus rather than an RNA virus. They don't mutate as quickly. It's quite a stable virus. So the initial sequences are pointing out to the fact that it's nothing new. It's one of the two strains from West Africa. So we know what we're dealing with it with. I don't think it's unlikely it'll come to Trinidad, although of course, people have it, so there's a possibility. We need to make sure our doctors understand the symptoms, so people need to go to, if they get these kind of rashes, bumps, they need to go and get health, go to their doctors. But I'm not worried. I'm not too worried about it.
Do you think the world is in a better place to handle a future pandemic?
The $6 million question. Let's hope so. My word. We've talked about lessons learned ever since COVID started, the importance of learning the lessons from it. But my fear is that we won't learn as many lessons as we should. We are in a much better situation potentially because we've learned so much about what's needed to face a pandemic like this. What infrastructure do we need to put in place? What support of health systems do we need to put in place? What vaccine construction places and where they should be, like across the developing world? What research we need to do, how we need to close down wet markets, how we need to protect our wildlife, how we need to stop impinging on wildlife habitats. All these things, there's millions of things that we know now we need to do, we're in the answer to your question was we should be in a much better place. But the worry is, are we actually going to take it on? Are we going to spend all that money and everything that's needed in order to make sure that we ensure that we're not going to get, or we reduce the chances of another pandemic as much as possible? That's the $6 million question, because we have so many challenges at the moment to face, and one of the biggest ones, of course, is climate change.
Prof, thank you for being with us this morning. As
You're
usual,
welcome.
Interesting.
It's a pleasure.
All right.
So I can go for my breakfast now.
You can go for your breakfast with your peacock. Yes.
Permission granted.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Bye, and have a good day.
Okay, you too as well, Professor Christopher Oura.
Recording stopped.
So much for being on the Power Breakfast Show on Power 102 Digital. All right. As we head to our news brief, all courtesy Champlain Auto Services. As soon as we get AV in, we will get started. And of course, she's walking in right now.